Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Senior Boulevard TV. I'm particularly excited today as I will be interviewing Dr. Ira Sobel shortly on one of the most important topics related to longevity as well as senior housing. Dr. Ira Sobel has been formerly active as a CPA in KPMG, and she recently received her PhD from Tel Aviv University. In her research, she has been focusing on the economic and social impacts related to aging. Needless to say that I have high expectation for this interview. As reading through her research, she has not only identified key pain points in the finance ecosystem related to longevity, she went even further and established strong linkages with the senior housing challenges, which is of course one of the pillar subjects to this channel. So I welcome you to join us for the interview and participate immediately in the chat session. Enjoy the interview. Good afternoon, Ira.
Good afternoon, Alexander. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me and inviting me to Boulevard channel.
No, I'm very excited to have you here on Senior Boulevard TV. Thank you for accepting the invitation. So thank you for making some time of him, and I look forward to this session.
I hope I can contribute to your to all this entrepreneurship on the finance aspects of aging and longevity.
Yeah, indeed. We're going to cover really some very, very exciting topics. Basically, always what we are confronted with is that people ask always, yeah, but how we're going to finance senior living and so forth. And whether we can like it or not, it always comes down to who pays, how does he pay, especially in this whole longevity context. So I'm so excited to have you on the channel to launch for the first time, addressing the finance topic for the first time. But before we dive into this, all these exciting points, perhaps a quick introduction from your side, Ira.
Okay, so I'm I'm an accountant by profession. I worked for many years in KPMG, which is a global accounting firm. And I was also a member of a board of directors of several traded companies here in Israel. But at the same time, as an academics, I work on the economic aspects of aging, where my PhD focused on the effect of life transitions on household wealth. And I compared between Israel and Germany in my research because Germany as a reference for what happened to household wealth over time when the welfare state is quite or relatively very supportive. While in Israel, privatization of welfare is very developed. So comparing with this between these two countries, my question was, what did the effect of privatization on household wealth that while people experience different life transitions? Now, besides teaching and writing academic papers based on my PhD, I've started an entrepreneurship, and the vision is to build a financial platform for older adults and their caregivers, which I can elaborate more a little bit further. But this is something that I really focus on now.
Excellent. So there's a lot of points that you just made in the introduction that we can dive into. I'm not sure. Well, let's. I say we'll try to address most of them during this interview. Perhaps starting with the first question: that why do you believe that finance is actually at the heart of the whole longevity challenge?
Okay. So first, there are two layers to answer this question, because finance is both on a macro level and micro level. Most of the problems of sustainability of countries is how they are going to finance the pensions. And social security is in a big problems all around the world, because as populations age rapidly, and what we call a dependency ratios are also accelerating, meaning more people are retiring or already retirees, and the number of employed people is decreasing. So this equilibrium, or what we call it the dependency ratio, is a big problem in many countries. So now the question is, who takes the risk? So if the country takes 100% theoretically this risk of dependency ratios, so the country continues to accumulate debt. But while the risk is on the household, and the people in the households, or the member of the households, they're the ones to provide for themselves in retirement, so then it becomes the risk and the problem of the individual. Mm-hmm. So over time, as the macro or the country is taking the back seat in providing for pension, and public pensions are decreasing, more and more responsibility lies on the shoulder of the individual. Mm-hmm. So pension and income and health care and out-of-pocket medical expenses and housing are all result of this process of individualization of risk from the country or from the state to the individuals.
How do you see this challenge, what you're just addressing? How do you see that translated from the consumer perspective, from perhaps also the service or financial service provider perspective? And perhaps could you also make at some point a link to how do you see the housing aspects of this? Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah. So I think that the consumer is quite confused, because all the research show that financial literacy is quite low, also among people that are with high education. So people are quite confused, because the market or the marketplace of pensions and healthcare and medical care and also housing is very fragmented. So people, until they don't really experience what they need in a certain life event or life transition, they're usually not asking for help. But the problem is that retirement and end of life needs planning. So the big challenge for service providers, on the other hand, is how to convince people to prepare for retirement when they're 20, when they're 30, or even when they're 50. So from the consumer point of view, or the consumption unit, which could be either the individual or the family, there's a big confusion. And it's very difficult for individual to take care of its own longevity risk, because we don't know how many years we're going to live. Absolutely. Financial advisors, on the other hand, have their own incentives, and often they are product driven and not solution driven. So this is also a problem of intermediaries that probably robo-advisory will give us only at least partially a solution. But when we talk about housing, so this is also something that we have, this is a new challenge, especially amid the pandemic. And housing is very central, or housing ownership and living arrangements are central to the preparation of retirement. And now I think we are in a point of time where we have to find new models, both for investors who are interested in investing in housing or in assisted living and nursing care, and on the other side, to find what are the right financial models for the consumers.
Yeah. So it's basically the challenge is putting this into a whole multi-perspective view to
Yeah,
find there's sort of the I should have said the golden grail or just of solution that actually fits everybody's model and going basically from a product, as you mentioned, towards an entire solution model where
right.
everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is
So
basically
I
the work.
think that, yeah, and I think that today technology and especially APIs can help us a little bit, maybe more in the future, as open banking and open finance are advanced, like in the UK or in Singapore, we see more and more comprehensive dashboards
Mm-hmm.
that financial advisors provide to their clients in order for them to take the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
But housing, again, I think is central.
Mm-hmm.
Are you housing, do you have are you an owner of a house?
Mm-hmm.
So this is one, I mean, this also creates a bigger inequality in old age. Somebody who has a house is really in a different situation uh, when compared to people with no housing
Yeah.
ownership or rent or whatever. And also this has a very difference between countries and cultures.
Yeah. And
And
also
talk also, if you would like, I can elaborate also a little bit about it.
mm-hmm. Yes, please. So absolutely. I will also
Okay.
at some point to see how do you see this if we would divide it in sub themes, Isa,
Yeah.
that perhaps you could tiny bit also elaborate on that, because I know you've been working on that, and I think our
On the
audience would be
housing
very
issue.
interesting. Yeah, no, how's it? No, also all the overall challenges. Then you in your research and your work purposely that I had the chance to
Yeah.
read already, you've identified really spot on needs that you see need to be addressed, and you regroup them very nicely in the work that I've had privilege. And perhaps we can share that also with the audience.
Okay. So when I'm looking like a more comprehensive view of the longevity economy, I've been researching this in the last year based on my PhD, which was more on the economic aspects. My PhD was about the intersection of finance and aging. But recently I expanded my curiosity. I mean, my curiosity is more about the intersection of three things: finance, aging, and technology. And when I interviewed many entrepreneurs and VCs and banks and even insurance companies, in order to understand where are we going with this longevity economy, I think that in my perspective, we can categorize it into three aspects or three categories. One is the protection. How are we going to protect older adults? And we see technological solutions for tracking, anti-scams, and fraud against older people.
Mm-hmm. That's very important.
Other category is also everything to do with finance, is planning and monitoring. How we
Mm-hmm.
plan for retirement.
Very important.
Yeah, and this we see digital trust and wills, pension tech, wealth tech, optimization and utilization of medical rights.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then I think the most interesting is the third category, is how to generate income from your
Oh,
existing
yeah.
assets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And here we see that, again, housing is really central because, for example, we see new financial models like sell and stay. I mean, people sell their house because they want to age in place.
Yeah.
Somebody buys already the house when they are, but they can stay in the house. And this is, of course, calculated in the price.
Yeah.
Also, after they die, they transfer the ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Other interesting things about in this category of generating income is, of course, reverse mortgage.
Yeah.
also becoming, and life settlements, which is also becoming, especially in the States, more and more prevalent. And lastly, the big question is, how are we going to use the accumulated human capital of aging people after they retire? And there are very interesting websites and matches how we're going to utilize the human capital that is accumulated again. So we see one is protection, the other category is monitoring and planning, and the third one is what are the business models and financial models to generate income from your current assets.
Yeah, this is so interesting. It's really giving the whole overall perspective that from a consumer side, obviously in each of those perspectives, there's always this other side, the investor perspective. So no, I believe before perhaps at a later stage, we can dig into those later in future because it will take us so long. In general, how do you think, what challenges needs to be overcome to bring those solutions that you're just referring to the market? Why is it not happening today? What are the challenges you think?
First of all, I think that things are starting to happen. We see different new novel models of living for midlifers and empty nesters. But we have to see, there was like two edges, we can say. One on is the traditional home care assisted living, when people either you issued a bond, like we talked in the past, like there was, which is prevalent in Belgium, but in Israel, for example, people put a deposit, and this deposit is deaccumulated over time until a certain cap. Mm-hmm. This was one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is pure rent. So people can move to assisted living and just pay rent, and they don't have any ownership. But now we start to see in the middle models between these two sides. What, for example, I don't want to get into practical solutions, but there are many interesting, for investors, interesting new models that can, on one hand, help older adults to live in their communities, age in place, and not be lonely. And on the other hand, there is a sense of ownership and a profit that can be accumulated by the investors. So I think that investors are trying or starting to understand that home care, assisted living, aging in place can be very interesting with very novel business cases for investors in this huge market, both in Europe and in the States. Yeah.
And the challenge obviously will certainly first need to be overcome. How do you think the market now is ready for all of this? If you would say, perhaps it's different per product, I can imagine, but if you in general.
Yeah, I tell you what, many home care facilities are trying to redefine themselves. Because of the pandemic, we know that the problem started from home care facilities and nursing homes. Mm-hmm. So I think that the world is now at the phase of reinventing these new business models. So we are at the time of planning, of thinking, and we see startups in their PropTech, which is property technologies, mm-hmm. that maybe or probably they can disrupt this market, which is very, very traditional, very much concentrated, both in Europe and in the States. So I think that we will see also disruption by property technologies and home care together. Another thing is tokenization of real assets. And this is also something that is starting to emerge, but very, very slowly because of regulation and everything, as we know. But tokenization of real assets on one hand and home care on the other hand are two very different ecosystems. But probably we will see very soon that tokenization of real assets and home care can be mutually beneficial for business models on one hand and consumers on the other hand.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, just obviously from my side, Ira. So it actually triggers so many other things that would invite me to dig into any of the topics we just got into deeper. So before we could elaborate, would you have a general overall conclusion about the finance subject in longevity? What you see, we could really brief as the outcomes.
Look, I think it's very difficult to make a recap of the longevity ecosystem because on one hand, the data and the numbers, the potential is huge, are huge. On the other hand, there are barriers. And but that's why we need business people and also NGOs and all the adults all together to work to find new ways. I don't think we can recap the longevity economy. I mean, it's something that, for example, it depends where. In the States, longevity economy is quite institutionalized and not from today, not from yesterday. It's already from the beginning of the 2000s. So we know that we're talking about the baby boomers. And what is so interesting about the States is that baby boomers are also the generation with the highest wealth among all other generations. But in Europe, for example, there are differences. Germany is a tenant society. So people hold their finances or their wealth is not invested in housing. It's mostly invested in bonds, consumer and other deposits or in the capital markets. Switzerland is also an extreme case of a tenant society. So I think that we have to look at every country and see what is the regulation, how is household wealth invested. And for Israel, for example, we have 80% of housing ownership. So this is also a different way to approach the finances of older people. So either you're housing rich and cash poor, or you're housing poor and cash rich. This needs different economic models based on the differences in cultures, differences in regulation, and all these things have to be taken into account when we talk about the new, longer life.
Yeah. No, excellent. May I also come to one conclusion, Ira, from my side, personal side, and also for the channel, is that could it be possible already here we agree that we will have future sessions where we can perhaps dive into all of the particular points that we just raised, because I think there is so much out there. And on the topics that we do, obviously finance is the engine to make it all, I say, fit together and align one another. So I would really be excited to have you on future sessions where we can elaborate on all those points that you already.
But I think this is also what is so interesting, that we are waiting, we learn, and we have to really invest our brainstorming, creativity, and I think new models are rising. And this is also what is so nice about something that it's in its infancy.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And there is at least there is a huge future in this particular subject to be built around. So let me
Yeah.
really thank you, Ira, for your testimony. I'm very, very excited that we were able to have you on the channel. And
Thank you.
I really look forward for future sessions where we could dive into any of those subjects that you've raised more in depth.
Okay, thank you for inviting
Fantastic.
me, and I will really be happy to come again as and elaborate on everything that we have discussed.
Fantastic. Thank you so
Thank you,
much, Ira.
Alexander.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.